Elements Academy is a private microschool and family wellness community located in Braintree, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. Its founder is Heather Danino, a former teacher and special education department chair in the Massachusetts public schools, who realized that learning could and should be different. At Elements Academy, she has built a stunning alternative to conventional schooling. And I was so excited to visit Elements Academy last week during its first week of the new school year and to welcome Heather on the podcast today. Heather Danino, thanks so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a huge honor for me.
Oh, well, thank you. It's so wonderful to have you on. I really enjoyed seeing your space. We have a lot to talk about in terms of the evolution and iteration of Elements Academy, but I'd love to start with your experience as a public school teacher. You taught in the Boston suburbs for about 12 years in public schools. I'd love to hear about that experience and sort of when did you start to think about alternatives to conventional schooling?
Yeah, that's a great question. It feels like a lifetime ago, but also feels like yesterday. And I've been out of the public school systems I'd say about 5 years completely. I taught for about 12 years, and then I did professional development for public schools as well. When I was teaching, I loved it. I mean, I loved the kids. I loved the community aspect. I loved having other adults to talk to about education and different philosophies and things. Um, and I think that I thought that was what I knew. So I would say, starting out, I didn't realize that I was thinking about alternatives per se, even though many would say I was doing things very differently than the norm. Being a special ed teacher, I think I had to. That was kind of my job, right? I was getting kids that weren't able to learn like the certain thing in the certain way. And so I would do out of class services and in class services, trying to connect the dots for them, trying to not make them feel like a square peg trying to squeeze into a round hole. I was trying to figure out, like, okay, we all learn differently, right? Um, but the message they were getting was they learn differently, right? Not all of us, but like they do. And so I felt like I was constantly trying to like recondition what they thought about themselves and what they thought about their learning style, which has such a huge impact on our identity, really. Especially at the younger years, I was always in elementary, and so I tried to make it fun and make them realize that they actually do really like learning and they could really like school, and that being pulled out of class shouldn't be embarrassing. I had a lot of kids that were also being kind of made fun of or stigmatized for pullout services. So I really tried to connect deeply so that they would have fun, and maybe even their friends would be jealous that they were getting pulled out instead of being like, being picked on. It was like, well, could this be cool? Um, but it got exhausting for sure. And then it really was not until I became a mom that I realized, oh, I don't have the energy to go back to that. Like how much energy it took to always be kind of fighting upstream and trying to do things differently. I just felt like maybe maybe that's not the right setting. Maybe that's not the right, like maybe that's what was feeling so out of touch for me, you know? So I think it was always there. It was like threaded throughout everything I've done. I was always doing things different. I was always finding my own way. Um, but I didn't know there was another way. And truly reading your book, which came years later, but that was so many light bulbs for me because I was like, oh wait, like, yeah, this is what I've been trying to do all along, right? So
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that, Heather. So you went on maternity leave with your first child. That was sort of your exit from the district schools,
Yep,
but you expected to return, and
I
then
did.
kind of got into the parenting rhythm and routine, and then soon after having your first child was you were pregnant with your second, so that sort of led you to stay out of the system for a while.
Yeah.
And you had enrolled your older daughter into a Montessori preschool. So you were already sort of thinking at that point about alternative education. And then maybe you can talk about kind of what happened, sort of her kindergarten year, that really prompted you to take the leap into creating a schooling alternative.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Montessori, I was always drawn to Montessori because of the hands-on approach. Everything I did teaching was multisensory and hands-on. And, I had heard, oh, they get to choose what they're going to work on. And so I was drawn to that. And then my kids, neither of them went, I stayed home with them. I was really lucky enough to be able to be home with them for the first few years. And yeah, when my daughter turned 3, we went and visited a Montessori preschool, and it just was the right fit for her. I could just tell as soon as she walked in, her whole energy changed, and she was like, yes, all this light and nature. And she was a very joyful, curious, very self-directed learner from like when she was born. She was very much her own little human on her own path that I was just lucky enough to kind of be part of. My son's the same way in a different way, but she was joyful, she was curious, she was compassionate. So the Montessori approach really worked for her. And then, we had moved to this particular neighborhood in our city for the schools because my husband grew up here and he's like, this is the neighborhood to go if you want the good school. And I want that for my kids. Like, let's do that for our kids. So we had kind of always had the plan of kindergarten comes and, off she goes to kindergarten. And I had these dreams of meeting other mom friends and, finding my people, my community, walking her to school and having her have friends in the neighborhood. And as it got closer, I started getting nervous, but I like pushed that down. It was really my intuition saying like warning, warning, right? But I like pushed that down and I was like, it's fine, it's fine. Everyone gets nervous when they send their kid to kindergarten. And she went and she was fine, kind of. Like, but she was, I mean, first of all, I want so much more than fine. Like, fine is not our goal. Fine is never my goal for my life, for my kids' life, for my family. It's kids deserve more than fine. Um, but she was getting really, she was changing. Her curiosity disappeared. Her compassion was starting to disappear, which was so innate from day one. And she just would come home saying, like, I'm not supposed to help other people because I have to stay at my seat, or I'm not supposed to talk to my friends because I'm supposed to be quiet, or I'm supposed, and she was really starting to like learn these things that were normal, and they didn't align with our parenting style. They didn't align with what I wanted for her for education. And I started seeing really quickly the trajectory of that. Like, okay, she's 5, and people are telling me she'll be fine. It's what everyone does. Just send your kid to school. It's fine. But then I'm thinking, this is the relationship that she's creating with learning, with school, with people, with teachers, adults, these forms of hierarchy. Like, there's so many layers to it. Well, what does that mean for her 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Like, is that what I want to cultivate now? And it really wasn't. And I felt that really, really deeply. So she actually was only in that school for about a month, until I realized, like, I read your book and I started looking into the Sudbury Valley model and, different Montessori schools around here. And I mean, I was driving everywhere. I was going to every open house I possibly could, right? Because I was like, this can't happen. I can't let her be this complacent. And ultimately pretty quickly landed on I'm going to open my own school because I wasn't finding like the exact, I could have taken pieces from each school that I loved, but I just wasn't finding that perfect combination. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to open a school. So we pulled her out. She did her kindergarten year at the Montessori preschool that she was so successful at. That gave me the months I needed to kind of like do all the things to get lined up to open a school. That was back in 2019, and then it's all been uphill since there.
I just right, uphill in a good way,
In the best
but
way.
but I think this is amazing. So it was September of 2019, you enrolled your daughter in the local public school in the area of the city you had moved to
Yeah.
specifically for, those district schools, and even before enrolling her, you had this sort of motherly intuition that, "Gee, I'm not sure this is the right move, but let's see."
Yeah.
And then it just happened that same time you read Unschooled, my book that came out just a few months earlier in May of 2019. And that sort of solidified for you that there could be a different way of approaching education. So I wonder, as you kind of went through those months in that fall of 2019, thinking about becoming an education entrepreneur, crafting your own program, your own school, what were you looking to accomplish? Like, what did you want your school to look like that you weren't finding in some of the other schools, including some of the other kind of private or alternative, sort of progressive schools in the area?
That's a great question because there are some amazing schools around here. I mean, in the Boston area, there's no shortage of private schools, Montessori schools. I mean, there's a variety, right? So I think what I wanted to create and what I wasn't finding was somewhere that felt like home. And now, of course, that's going to mean something different to everyone because not everyone wants their kid to go to a school that feels like home. I mean, there are private schools around here that are, college prep even starting at like 5, right? Like this, it's like a very tracked, like here's where we want their end goal to be. Um, but I wanted it to feel like home. I didn't want it to feel like a traditional private school because that to me was going to create the same problems as the public school system did. And the Montessori schools and those kind of I would group in like some Waldorf and Montessori and non-traditional approaches there. It was a little bit too rigid for me. Like I need a lot of flexibility because I need to figure out what the kid needs and provide it. And so, whereas, Montessori and Waldorf, they're wonderful, and some of the materials we still use at the school, but it was too prescribed for us. We needed freedom. We needed to be able to think outside the box in whatever way our kids needed, whoever we were meant to serve. And of course, my daughter was kind of like the prototype because she's the fire that was like, hello, I need to remain curious and creative here. We knew that we were going to be really focused on, highly sensitive children, really intuitive, empathic, sweet, amazing children that were kind of getting lost in the system. Like I said, my daughter could have been fine. She can sit still. She can follow the rules. She can like earn a green in her behavior chart. We just didn't, I don't want that. That's not what we were going for. So we wanted cozy. One of our parents says our motto should be keep it cozy because we have couches and bean bags and cozy goes beyond the furniture. It's like, can we be comfortable with each other? Can we feel safe with one another? Can we feel safe to have these different learning styles and not feel uncomfortable about that and not try to hide it? But can we really be safe physically, mentally, emotionally with each other? I mean, the kids that we have now, for sure, we're all neurodivergent, gender inclusive. There's all sorts of things kids are going through, and we create a safe space for them. It has to be.
So, it's difficult to be an education entrepreneur under even the best circumstances. The startup process is incredibly challenging. But for you, you were about to launch, and then a global pandemic hits in the spring of 2020, which
Sure
I
did.
can only imagine what that was like for you, and potentially thinking about giving up. I would think at some point, but you didn't give up. You persevered, and I wonder what it was like for you, kind of over those sort of first two COVID years, in just really getting up and going. What were some of those challenges?
Yeah. Yeah, boy, that was unexpected. You know, it would have been like when I told my husband it was, October of 2019 was when we pulled G from kindergarten, put her into the Montessori. By November, I had the LLC like registered, and I was like, we're doing this, we're opening a school. And yeah, by March, he was like, are you still opening a school? Like, we're doing it. I never questioned whether or not we would still do it. But of course, we had to reroute, what is this going to look like? What do we really need here? And by then I had a couple families already show interest. And they said, if you do it from your basement, we'll go to your basement. I mean, we will figure this out. We know that we're not gonna, we already know we're not sending the kids back to school. So whatever you create, we're in, and as we went on and as the months went on, it was really over the summer that we solidified. We actually ended up, very serendipitous, getting the space that my daughter had done her Montessori school. That director, because of COVID, switched to home-based Montessori. So she took a small group to her home, and we moved our school into that space. It was a beautiful space, renting from a church, and so that gave us the, okay, here's where we're going to be. Now, how many kids are going to come? We don't know. I would say the challenges were really just trying to hold space for and support the families that didn't know what to do, right? Like I knew, look, I'm going to be here with my kids. Um and we had a couple other families that were also that 100%, right? And it was kind of like, here's what we're going to do, and if this sounds like it speaks to you, come join us. We didn't market like crazy. We didn't go out and hit the pavement really from the beginning, because we didn't know what it was going to be. And I didn't want to end up with, 30 kids that were now like having to go into a shutdown again, or we just didn't know. So we really tried to stay pretty versatile and adaptable. And it made us really anchor into like, what can we not live without? Like, what do we know we need to provide? And the academic stuff was easy. Like, we had all the materials. I had everything from being a teacher. We had all different programs, and the kids are going to learn to read and write and do math and all that stuff. Like, that's the easy part. But how can we hold space for what's going on here? And how can we be here for each other and still create a community among, we don't, about what else is going to happen? We don't know when it's going to end. We don't know, so it was a challenge. But looking back, I'm so grateful for the way we started, because it kept us really, really grassroots. It kept us really like, what really matters? Let's not get lost in the hubbub of like marketing and trying to fill seats.
I'm just blown away that you never questioned that you would open a school, even in the midst of school closures and remote learning and the sort of uncertainty of a pandemic and how long it would last. You are a true entrepreneur who just moves ahead with a commitment and drive, in your case, to provide an exceptional educational experience that's very learner centered and individualized, despite adversity. And like, to your point, that in some ways it was that adversity that led you to really focus on what your core mission was, and who your community was and who you were serving. So you ended up coming out of that quite successfully. You opened, as you mentioned, in this church space that had housed the Montessori preschool, and you were there for a while. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about your decision to open as a recognized K to 12 private school in Massachusetts, albeit lower cost than typical private schools,
Mhm.
particularly some of the sort of prep schools that are close by to your location.
Mhm.
You're about half the cost of those schools. But why choose the private school route? Because there are a lot of micro schools that sort of run off of a homeschool learning center
Mhm.
model, where students can attend full time or part time, but the students are recognized as homeschoolers. In your case, you really did want that private school registration. So tell us a little bit about why that was your path, and what it was like for you, or what it has been like for you
Yeah.
to become a recognized private school.
Yeah. That, it's interesting. We contemplated both options because we do have a homeschooling community within the school. We do offer part-time for kids who are registered homeschoolers. We actually even offer an online version of what we do. And so we did think about that, right? Should we just have everyone register as homeschool, and it gives a little more flexibility for where to meet or what to do, or, reporting and things like that. I think what it comes down to, honestly, is in my mind, I knew my kids my mindset was we are going to be doing Monday through Friday full time school, because I wanted community. I wanted that place that parents are dropping off. I wanted that place that you feel like you're at home, and I wanted them there as much as possible. And the kids wanted to be there as much as possible. Actually, all of our part-time kids end up full-time because they ask to come all the time. They even ask to come on the weekends. But um,
Which is why the homeschool component that you have, sort of opening your space as a part-time option for homeschoolers, is a savvy, recruiting technique, because
yeah,
your students attend and they fall in love with it and say, "Mom, Dad, I want to be here 5 days a week." And
right.
so yeah, a good tip for anyone listening.
Savvy by accident, right? Like
Yeah.
we really thought we knew that especially after 2020, there was a massive shift in homeschooling. And a lot of parents found themselves knowing they needed something different. So doing homeschooling, but not necessarily knowing, okay, now do I want to be the mom and the teacher? Now do I want to be the parent and the full-time chef and full-time, like all of the roles that we play as parents anyway? Can I really do that? And so we just knew that we wanted to support that community. We just knew that there were parents who knew they needed some support. It was better for them in some ways financially to do a part-time, but it also was, they want to be home with their kids. And we love that. I mean, if I wasn't going to school with my kids, I don't know when I would send them full time. I wouldn't have wanted to at 5. I wasn't ready at 5 to watch my daughter go to a full time program. I know that's odd to a lot of parents, are ready to drop the kid off and go have a party, but I wanted to be with my kids, and a lot of our parents are the same way. So it is a savvy business technique, totally by accident. Um, I think, going back to your question about private school, really what it came down to was we need to sign this lease for this space. The lease wants insurance, right, to have this commercial space. The insurance wants us to have private school approval, and private school approval requires all of this stuff in Massachusetts, right? And I know like state by state is so different, but Massachusetts requires the school committee to vote, and it's quite a hunk of loops to jump through. And so I made the decision early on, you know what? Let's just do it. Let's do it. We're gonna present to the school committee. I know we can do we know what we're doing. We know that what we're doing is incredible. We're providing individualized learning to every child. That is not what's happening typically in the public school system, right? So like we know that we can do this, and I think what I had been hoping for, at the time also was some sort of like partnership in a way with the school systems. You know, like there are, I mean, I'd been working in special ed. When people send kids out of district, there are places that cost upwards of, you know, 150,000 a year. And I thought, gosh, there are so many kids that actually just need what we're doing, and we're not that expensive. So couldn't the district kind of like see us as a collaboration? And I had been doing professional development with a lot of the teachers and curriculum specialists also. So I thought, you know, this could be great. Let's just get together and share what we're doing.
And did that work out for you?
So we no, it did not. um, it did not. I mean, they, you know, I don't think that there's so much red tape, right? There's just so much involved in out of district placements. There's so much involved in, you know, all of the kids that we have who are on IEPs or who do have diagnoses, their parents are paying out of pocket. They're not getting district money. They're not getting, you know, it just is such a fight, you know, and with that fight, were we to choose where our energy went, right? Like we only have so much energy, and as an entrepreneur, for sure, we have to choose kind of what battles are we going to fight. And getting out of district placement and getting money from the district or getting that, it just comes at a cost of also then what are you having to prove for it? And are you having to do certain tests that they want or progress reports that they want? We're doing our own thing. We love what we're doing. We'd rather not go that route. So we're good.
Yeah, I hear you. You know, in 2023, there are 9 states that have universal or near universal education choice that provides all families with access to education funding to use at various micro schools and low cost private schools and educational therapies and tutoring programs and so on. Massachusetts is not one of those 9, but you're right that there is still sort of special education out of district placements, like you mentioned, extremely difficult to get, you know, kind of a long drawn out process. And, you know, I think that you're certainly right to say, wouldn't it be great if we could have more of these public private partnerships to do what's right for kids? And hopefully Massachusetts will get there sooner than later. But in the
Yep.
meantime, you have created a program that is financially more accessible than other sort of secular private schools in the greater Boston area, but still financially inaccessible for some families. You've been able to find ways of providing scholarship funds. You are a recipient of a Vela Education Fund microgrant that you said you've used for scholarships and some other sort of resources in your micro school. So you're trying to make this environment as accessible as possible. And for the families that are coming, it's been life changing. You've said for some of your students, I wonder if you can share sort of generally some examples of what you're seeing in terms of transformations from young people who may have been in conventional schools, then come to Elements Academy, and it's like night and day.
Yeah. Oh, I might get a little emotional with this part because this is why we do what we do. This is why through all the entrepreneurship heartache, like it doesn't even hold a candle to the light we see from, I mean, these kids are amazing. The transformation we see, simply put, is they become themselves. They just become themselves. They Parents will say, of course, like, oh, they're happy, they want to go to school. I mean, there are those very simple things like, wow, they're just so thrilled they can like go to the bathroom when they want and eat when they want, and like these very simple human rights that we provide to people, right? But that is it's just they get to be curious again. They get to be who they were as a kid. You know, a lot of the kids, especially, you know, we've had a group of teens come in and they play. Like they've missed out on that for 10 years. You know, they've missed out on that play if they've been in traditional schools for, you know, 8, 9, 10 years of their life, and then coming to this setting and being with multi-age kids and being part of a family, being accepted for who they are and seen for who they are. Like, oh, you actually do get me and you care to get me, and then you can start to dig out like, well, who am I? Like what does make me who I am, and how we embrace that we all learn differently. We embrace everything about us, all of our individuality, all of our quirks, and a happy kid can finally learn, because a happy kid can finally feel safe enough to breathe and to enjoy what they're doing and to find their strengths, find their passions. I mean, kids want to learn. Like, they are being born as curious beings. And if that's been taken away from them, or if that's been damaged, or kind of like molded in some ways along the way, we just get to like break that mold and say, no, let's figure out what your mold is. Like, it doesn't have to be that way or this way, it can be your way. So, I mean, the parents are just grateful to get their kids back. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Yeah, and you said that this time of year, kind of September timeframe, is when you often start getting inquiries from families who, may have been like you, right? When you sent your daughter to kindergarten those years ago, and then, had this inkling that something wasn't right, and then they see what's actually happening and how their children are responding and start to look for something different. And of course, the benefit to those parents that you didn't have is that now you exist. Elements Academy exists. They don't have
Right.
to recreate the wheel. You have already done it. And so you expect some more increase over the coming weeks as families look for something different. And I wonder if you can share a little bit about what a typical day is like, because you at Elements Academy really blend sort of structure and self-directed learning. You have, sort of some curriculum expectations and certain rhythms of the day, but a lot of it is highly individualized. So share what a typical day is like. And this is a mixed age environment, sort of pre-K to 12. So you have
Yeah.
all kinds of different learners together.
Oh, for sure. Oh my goodness, the whole spectrum. I mean, pre-K to 12 is such a wide range, right? And we have spaces that we share together, and then they have spaces that they share with a smaller group of somewhat similar aged peers, although there's still multi-age even within that. We find a rhythm that works for the kids. So it definitely changes by year, and it even changes by month, by week, by day. There are days that we will always follow what we know they need. So our teacher training truly is like, how can we be more intuitive? How can we be really present to tune into what they need at that moment? The rhythm that we've found works the best is usually starting the day outside, movement, fresh air, greeting each other. Some want to chat, some want to eat snacks, some want to sit and look at the trees blowing in the wind. Whatever way works best for them, we find that transition into like switching from home to school. Then we usually do some
And you
sort of
don't,
like,
sorry, and you don't have a
yeah,
hard start time too. I think that's another
yeah,
benefit that I see in a lot of these kind of innovative learning models, and especially newer micro schools. There's not, you have to be here at 8:30 or you're tardy.
yeah.
You have, just a more of a flow to the morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get out the door sometimes. And then you add kids on top of that. It's like really hard to get out the door and be on time anywhere, and traffic around here can be either really easy or really annoying. So yeah, we don't time is kind of fluid. And you're welcome to show up when you show up. I mean, we also have kids that do appointments during the day that are easier to get. We have a lot of kids doing therapies. Some do it at school. Some of the therapists come to school. Some of the kids do it over Zoom. Some of the parents come and pick them up, take them to therapies, bring them back. So it really is really flexible, because we have to be. Like, it just makes anything that we can do to make less stress for parenting and for school is what we'll do. So we start outside, and that helps a lot of the people. When you come, and they greet everyone with big hugs and highs when they come out of the car. Um, when we go inside, they usually want to do a snack and read aloud. We usually have some sort of group chat, so we do not do morning meeting or anything like that, but we will do kind of a group chat and see kind of like, how are we feeling? What do we want to do? Let's make a plan for our day. We can talk about anything out of the ordinary that's going on. Um, and then they'll get into their learning zone. So they've called it like they like to change the words. They're really in charge of what to call it: growth time, challenge time, work time, learning time, all sorts of things. But they get a long chunk of time, and that looks really different for a 4-year-old than it does for a 14-year-old, right? But it's all still self-directed, and it's all still non-coercive. And so a 4-year-old might want to learn to read, or they might want to make a marble run, or they might want to build with blocks, right? And a 14-year-old might also want to make a marble run, right? Or they might be doing Khan Academy, or they might be doing something that we've created, some sort of curriculum program for them. So we get to know the kids really well. We create their learning maps, is what we call them, a journey through learning maps, um, and we find the program that works for them, and then they do it. It's like it's so simple. It's not always easy, but it's really simple. Just finding the right program and having them go at their own pace, and they're off on their own most of the time. Some of my teachers are like, "Wow, this is weird. What do I do now?" They're like learning. What do I do? But we do that long chunk of time. Then we have lunch. We go outside for a while. It's usually around an hour, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, depending on what kind of mood the kids are in. And then we do another chunk of learning in the afternoon, which usually ends up being more project based. So social studies, science experiments, could be small group, could be whole class, exploration. Like, we don't do whole class lessons, but it could be like, oh, we're all learning about space, and let's talk about, so all different types of stuff. Every day looks different, but that rhythm has seemed to really work. We play, we eat, we work, we play, we eat, we work.
Yeah, and just something that is, to us is so obvious and seems so revolutionary. This idea that you go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom, that you eat when you're hungry. Like you said, human rights that are systematically denied to most children in conventional classrooms. And it's just remarkable that it takes sort of schooling alternatives to remind us that these should be sort of human rights that we're extending to children, and that we as adults would never tolerate that kind of authoritarianism in our own lives, but somehow we're okay with it with millions of children. So again, kudos to you for creating a space that's much more welcoming and nurturing and compassionate for young people. And it's also that way for families too. You talk about Elements Academy as being, again, a private micro school for pre-K to grade 12, but it's also a family wellness community. And tell us about what that looks like.
Oh, this is one of the coolest parts to Elements Academy. I have to say, like, when I was dropping my daughter off at kindergarten, granted, it was only a few short weeks, and I'm sure I would have met more people there, but I felt really uncomfortable. I didn't feel like I was meeting my people. I felt judged, and I felt uncomfortable. And as an introvert, it's not super easy for me to meet people, but I was like, man, this isn't what I always pictured. This isn't what they show in the movies. Like, you drop your kid off at school and you have friends and you go out to coffee together. And so that's what we're trying to create, and not only for the families whose kids come to Elements Academy, but actually just for any family. So because of this beautiful new space that we have just moved into, and we are so lucky to have more space than we even really needed. We occupy an entire floor of an office building, and so we are going to be able to do more family wellness stuff, including not only having play groups, which we've done in the past for kids as young as babies, so that parents can come, meet people, talk, but with that play group, also having a nap room so that the parents can nap while we can play with their baby or hold their baby or help them. Like, how can we support? What do you really need as a new parent? You need a nap. um, we have a wellness room so that we're looking to partner with local massage therapists, chiropractors, acupuncture, all of those things that you can get while your kid is there. So you're not having to pay a babysitter $30 an hour to go get a quick massage. You're now looking at, that's a $300 day. Um, and then part of what I used, you mentioned the Vela grant, was also to have a co-working space, so that there are a lot of parents that are working from home, and parenting can feel really isolating. And so now, come do it together. And how can we create this community of wellness together, and not just for the private micro school, but we're really looking to just, how can we be more inclusive? Like, how can we get more people in the door to know that you're loved and you're seen, and here we are, like, and we can be here for each other.
Oh, I just love that. And I love, Heather, that this, kind of the self-directed micro school and the family wellness center is so reflective of you and your background as a teacher and as a yoga instructor. I know you mentioned to me when we met last week that that you're also a yoga instructor. So you're kind of bringing all of that together to create this ideal learning environment and family wellness community. So just really exciting to see. You have this stunning new space that you've signed a multi-year lease on, lots of room for you to grow. And I wonder, what you think or what you hope sort of occurs for you over the next, say, 3 years of your lease. You then have an option to extend if you'd like. Where do you see Elements Academy over the next several years?
Oh, good question. Well, I think if 2020 taught me anything, it's don't plan too far ahead. So who knows? I mean, we will definitely, like you said, it's a multi-year lease. We will definitely be there. We are growing roots in Braintree. We're super excited to have just moved there, and we love that space, and we want to fill it with lots of kids, lots of families, lots of love. Um, if I had my way, I think in 3 years I'd have more schools. I want more schools. I want to have schools all over honestly, all over the world. There's so much need for this in so many places, to have this community and to be able to find pockets where we could, like, have a community would just be such a dream.
And so valuable and beneficial for so many students and families looking for something other than a conventional classroom. What's your advice, Heather, to other aspiring education entrepreneurs who may be listening or watching, thinking about launching their new program, their new micro school, like you were contemplating in the fall of 2019? What's your top advice to them?
My advice is just do it, and you'll figure it out as you go. I know that there are a lot of, and I mean, I'm a Virgo, I'm a huge planner. So it's not like I'm a wing it kind of person. I'm actually super detail oriented. But, the best laid plans change, especially anything with kids and families. I mean, just do it, and you will like, make a plan, but be ready to change that plan a million times. And I think, going back to when I spoke about 2020 helping us really anchor into our core values, like, just really being really solid on your non-negotiables. Like, what are you willing to give up, and oh, who cares what space we're in, or but, like, what do you really care about? For me, we really found it was like, okay, we really need this relationship with learning and this connection. Well, that can happen in a lot of different places and a lot of different ways, but finding those non-negotiables, I think, is super important.
And Heather, what is the best way for my listeners and viewers to reach out to you, to find out more about Elements Academy, to
Yeah.
stay in touch?
Oh, please reach out. I love to hear from people. I answer every email. So I send out emails to my newsletter, and the newsletter is probably I think newsletter is actually kind of an outdated word. I guess that shows my age. I think now it's got a fancier. But joining our email list is the best way to stay in touch because we send out emails every time play group is happening, or we have a new massage therapist, or we're doing, all of that stuff. So that on the website is the easiest way to stay in touch, is just getting on our email list. But my email is heather@elementsacademy.org. And I truly read and write back to everyone that reaches out. I love hearing from other parents, especially. So if you're a parent, I know you asked about my advice for entrepreneurs, but like my advice for parents is to just do something too. Like if you're where I was thinking this doesn't feel right, trust your gut. Like and reach out to me if you need a cheerleader for that, because we know as parents, we know, and our kids know, and just follow your gut.
I love that. It was such great advice for both parents and teachers, whether they're considering being an education entrepreneur or just looking for the right educational fit for their child. And again, the website is elementsacademy.org. And Heather Danino, best wishes to you. And thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Carrie.